Qiubai is hot, and handsome, and ignored. With the Monster Hunter collab around the corner, many are deciding to skip on Qiubai for the next broken unit that is the true limited spin to win Yato. I pulled for Qiubai in Wind Chimes, and skipped operators need love too. So come with me on a journey to Chunfen, where the only death to be found in that city was the death of my own sanity. DC1 immediately triggers a trauma response by putting me back into the hell that was Invitation to Wine. I'm so shocked that I fail immediately. I failed 2 more times since Qiubai's S2 is not up long enough to kill the swarm of talismans that the ball guys drop. I was left destitute after the Invitation to Wine, so my Qiubai is only E1 since I couldn't afford the E2. Seeing that it was impossible with the S2, I make a detour to LMD farm and get enough to get her to E2. Now with an E2 Qiubai, I enter the stage with new hopes. S3 does some serious work to be able to burst down the big waves of talismans. Even with S3 and Saga S2, the stage is barely clear with Qiubai taking down the last talisman half a second before it leaps. I finally beat the first stage of this event, and it only took getting an E2 6-star. And that notion put fear into my heart for this challenge. In DC2, we fight Code of Brawl enemies with the bullies that require 3 block. With my team sorely lacking in any blocking ability, this stage is quite a challenge. I fail since my Qiubai does not bind enough to get her talent and kill the bullies. On that topic, I'd like to introduce some terminology that will be used for the rest of the video. Qiubai exists in 2 states of being, and you won't know which one you'll get until you activate her S3. One state of being is Qiubind, where she procs her talent frequently and does massive amounts of damage. The second is Qiubidint, where she does not proc her talent and does meaningless amounts of damage. Okay, now back to DC2. On my second attempt, Qiubidint strikes again, being able to kill the bully on his first go around. I switched Qiubai's placement with Saga, thinking that S2 could kill the drunks and hit the bullies as they run by. This is another instance where Qiubidint appears, being able to kill a single bully due to her not binding, so I fail again. I move Qiubai again to the top right to give her the most chance to kill the bullies as it drives by. This actually works, but her skill isn't back in time to get the next one, and I lose to the last enemy on the stage. I spent another 30 minutes failing, but getting my timings better for Qiubai, which results in her being able to use it twice, but Qiubidint keeps showing up. So I hit the board and make the most galaxy brain strategy ever conceived by mankind. A plan so godly I ascend it to the 4th dimension where I put it on the MS Paint canvas, and I immediately throw it out and do none of it in favor of appeasing a singular Wind Chimes simp that was watching my stream. And being a Wind Chimes non-believer, I wanted to see if she could get the job done, so I go into the stage with 3 operators, a Wind Chimes support, a Mobilion's amount of healing, and a Qiubai. Qiubind actually shows up and does a good amount of damage against the first bully. With a well-timed S2, Wind Chimes puts the bully down to 1 HP. With another well-timed Wind Chimes S2, she's able to put down the first bully and stuns the second. This stuns allows for Qiubai to get more time to get her skill back and do the most damage. Qiubind shows up and puts the last bully on death's door, and with the final Wind Chimes activation, she brings home the stage victory, turning me into a Wind Chimes believer. In DC3 we fight drunks, bow workers, and the Seaborn. Wait, what? The stage goes super smoothly. It ends up being a Saga S2 skill showcase for the most part, with Wind Chimes holding her right side quite well on her own. It went so smooth, I never even activated Qiubai's skill even once. DC4 is another Code of Brawl map, and the same issues arise that were present in DC2. I instantly lose my first attempt via the bully just walking through my Wind Chimes. I switch my position to Qiubai on the bottom to make her only job to kill the bullies. Saga's used to lane hold and kill essentially 80% of the map. Wind Chimes is put on the top lane to 1v1 the drunks. I use Qiubai's skill ready to kill the first bully to make sure she has enough time to get her skill back by the time the second one spawns. Saga deals with the left lane easily, and Wind Chime actually holds against all the drunks at E0 level 50. I am now a true believer. Qiubai has her skill in time to the last bully that spawns, but Qiubidint strikes again and she doesn't do enough damage to bring it home. I never imagined a day where I'd lose because of a E2 6-star not doing her job instead of the E0 crusher. I play the stage again in the same manner, and with better skill activation timings, Qiubai is able to kill the last bully, bringing home the victory. DC5 was another hell that took me an hour to do. Also, impossible for my team with its low level and lack of operators. The onslaught of enemies is too much for 3 operators to handle. That's not even counting the Centurions on the left that an E0 Wind Chime is unsurprisingly unable to 1v1. I tried different timings on S3 to deal with the last rush of enemies and even try S1 for its AoE damage, but nothing works. So I farm for 20 minutes to get Wind Chimes E1, and I add both an E0 level 15 Click and an E0 level 1 Hung to the team. Click is here because she shows up in Wind Chimes' story and comments on Wind Chimes' broken camera. That came from a terminal rock cancer patient that had a dream. So yeah, that's why she's here. And while Hung, he's raid up and on a permanent team for the event, so let me just have this one. The 6 Hung fans out there need a W2 once in a while. I did have a board moment where I laid out a plan without those 2, but long story short, it didn't work. Big surprise. With those 2 added, I switch on my game plan entirely to make a huge choke point with Saga and Qiubai on the left side. Wind Chimes is again put by herself to hold off the Centurions. Saga with S3 sits blocking all the enemies with Qiubai helping kill the rest of them. The skill timings are pretty tight since Qiubai needs to have her skill back up for the last wave of enemies. Also need to be wary of when I use Saga's skill since in my first attempt I used her skill too early and Qiubai gets overrun and dies to the heavy defender. Despite failing, I do learn that Chimes is able to solo all the Centurions that come out of the red box. A Chimes believer is me. I fail my second attempt via a troll E0 hung that only blocks 2, so Qiubai ends up leaking. On my successful attempt, I switched to Qiubai to S1 for a better skill cycling and AoE burst damage, and it goes very smoothly, with my E0 level 15 click doing click amounts of damage and a sacrificial hung, Saga and Qiubai clean up the last remaining wave of enemies rather easily, and of course, Chimes the GOAT for soloing Centurions on the left side when she's only E1 level 15. DC6 went as smoothly as DC3. Click does a surprise amount of damage despite being such a low level and easily handles the top lane by herself. This is another Saga sweep map where she holds the front line and does most of the work. Qiubai is kept on S1 for AoE damage and Chimes is set up to help clear out the slugs in front of Saga. The only real dangerous enemy is the big sword chungus that hits a little too hard, but luckily I have the bird Mulberry doing billions amount of healing and it keeps the squad alive. The team cleans up the last few slugs and we get a nice easy win after the long hour of losses given to me by DC5. This map is pretty tight in terms of how my team can clear it. It has 2 big waves of enemies that only Hung and Qiubai can deal with since Saga and Chimes are needed in the top lane to hold and clear out enemies. I unsurprisingly failed due to an early Hung death. I haven't even mentioned that some sick fuck degenerate decided that civilians would be an awesome addition to this map. I come to the conclusion that it is impossible with such low level units. I return to the LMD grind to give levels to my operators. I give Hung fans another W by actually giving him levels and get him to E0 max, which puts me probably in the 0.1% of players that actually have given Hung anything at all. Besides that, the rushes and skill timings are too tight with my current setup and I keep losing for the next hour without any real improvement due to my click and Hung being E0. I gave up for the day and ended the stream. Off stream I spent all my sanity potions on LMD, and time grinding deep dive IS3 since the rewards for it is 10k per mission, just so I could actually level my team. I end with an E1 max click and an E1 40 hung. I also chefed up a Michelin star meal off stream to debut and impress my viewers on the second attempt, and in true Mochi fashion after bigging up my own strat, I immediately mess it up. But I redeemed myself on the second attempt. I placed Qiubai and hung way up to make the best use of Qiubai's skill range. Saga is used with her S3 to kill the archer and striker, when Chimes is again placed on the top lane to hold and is retreated after killing 2 of the archers. Click is placed to free the civilians and kill 2 slugs that spawn for the second wave, all within 1 skill activation. Saga is retreated after killing all the exploding slugs so she can be ready for the last Imperial Striker at the end of the map. For Qiubai's skill to be ready for the second wave, I rely on Hung's S2 to SP batter her, which gets Qiubai's skill just in time for the second wave before anything can leak past her. This is where I let Qiubai sweep the last wave all by herself with Hung tanking. Saga, Click, and Chimes are redeployed with just enough time to clean up the last 2 enemies of the stage. DC8 is a pain. It comes with a lot of strong and annoying mobs, alongside the fart man himself. With heavy bomb drones also being deployed, it makes figuring this map quite difficult. My first few attempts end in failure due to me using Qiubai to hold on the left, but she's too squishy to hold against the continuous hordes of those spear dudes. On attempt number 4, I find that Qiubai can be placed at the edge of the drone circle, allowing her to take it down with S3. It takes me about 25 minutes to finally reach Emperor's Blade without having any type of leak beforehand. And my team gets exploded before EB can even fart on anyone. An hour into the run, I hit the board where I come up with my pièce de résistance of a plan. I will have Hung block all the spear dudes, Qiubai will remain where she is, holding the right lane. Click will also remain where she is, doing her only job of destroying the 2 drones. Mulberry will continue doing Mulbillion's amount of healing for the team from the back lines. To top off this brilliant plan, Chimes on S2 will be behind Qiubai to deal the massive match damage against casters, since Qiubai does 3-star amounts of damage against them. I make 2 last win conditions that need to be met for this to work, and then I enter the stage. And for the first time ever, it didn't work. The plan was going smoothly until Qiubai suffered defeat at the hands of the caster she couldn't put down. Chime follows soon after, both of them failing my win condition of don't die spectacularly. I keep attempting to try for an hour and a half or so, with my team always perishing at the last wave of enemies. I also at some point give Hung 5 more levels thinking that would change the game plan around. Spoiler alert, it didn't. At hour 2, I switch up my positions. I decide to have Chimes tank and help Qiubai with her lane, and everything else stayed the same, which actually goes pretty well until Qiubai commits a grievous account of skill issue and perishes. I keep attempting this, but then I run into the next problem with this setup. Bind always shows up for EB, and she does way too much damage and causes him to fart all over the place, killing my entire team. However, if I don't use Qiubai's skill during that last wave, she will die. I keep failing till I finally decide to do a tried and true style of stalling the boss. Usually use a cannibal abomination to stall IEB, and I didn't try that because I had no faith in Hung, much less at E145. But it somehow works. This single moment single-handedly turned me from a Hung hater to a Hung believer. All the account damage I thought I was incurring by leveling up for this challenge vanished, It also helped quell the growing doubt within me since I was fearing an invitation to wine 2.0. However, that doesn't solve all my problems. Qiubai was frequently Qiubai'd and kept perishing to the second wave of strikers and casters, so after 30 minutes of more failures, I decided to make a big brain play. Keeping Hung stalling on the top left corner, I switched Qiubai and Wind Chimes placements. This way, Qiubai can still kill the second drone, and Wind Chimes can deal with all the enemy casters. This is still relying on Qiubai's skill though, since my low level Wind Chimes can't survive an enraged striker, and it goes amazingly. We clear all the waves, even with an unfortunate Wind Chime's death, but Qiubai shows up and binds all over the place and kills the remaining enemies. However, Click perishes to the last drone, so she didn't have enough time to take it out due to a death earlier and it leaks. I decide to see how long Hung can actually stall for, and it's not much longer before he perishes to EB. With the run over, I decide to see how much damage my team can do in its second phase. We get EB to about half HP without any real setup, so finally after 3 hours I start to feel some hope that this run is actually doable. Now it was only time to find the perfect skill timings for both Qiubai and Mulberry, since I need her S2 for the last two strikers to keep Wind Chimes alive long enough for Qiubai to take them down. I take another 25 minutes or so of attempts, with this setup always ending on the mission failure screen due to a mistimed Mulberry skill or the more frequent Qiubai moments. I was getting closer, the finish line was right there, all I needed was perfect RNG. And obviously, that is something that can be done via skill, but finally, I reached the promised land. I start the stage as I have been for the last 30 minutes or so, Saga first, then Qiubai second to hold all the Lance dudes. Click before Mulberry so Mulberry can tank all the hits coming from the central lane, keeping Click safe to DPS the drones, and finally, Wind Chimes to hold the other lane. I activate an early Mulberry skill in preparation for the second wave and use the Sanctuary effect on S2 so Wind Chimes can take minimal amounts of damage. In a Qiubai moment, she's unable to kill the drone, leaving it at 1 HP. While not a problem, it did give me a feeling of failure for the future. The last wave of enemies are incoming, and I choke the Mulberry skill, which leads to a Wind Chime's death. But in a Giga Chad move, Qiubai comes out of nowhere and saves the day. She takes down the last striker with the last few seconds of her skill activation, making me not regret the almost 100 pulls I used to get her, and redeeming all of her Qiubai moments. With that, the last two enemies that are being stalled by Hung are left. I've reached the halfway point, and my victory was in sight. In a funny turn of events, I had one last level up I could afford, and it went to Hung as a joke, thinking it would change the whole game. And it actually did. E1 level 46 Hung is able to perma-stall out the boss, while E1 level 45 Hung could not. Now I'm sweating, since I've never even gone this far, and I felt deep inside me that if I failed now, something would break, but I had to keep going. I let Click be the main DPS for this phase, and she takes the fart like a true champion. Hung barely survives. In my first amount of luck and ages, Hung was at his skill proc, so he's able to heal and keep tanking the first phase, further strengthening my Hung believer status. I let Hung evolve into a boss killer and set up my units for the second phase. I throw my entire team at Emperor's Blade. Wind Chime does a good job tanking with her S2, and Saga and Qiubai do their best jobs, but it's not enough. My team perishes, leaving Emperor's Blade at a quarter HP. Click takes another fart to the face and deals a decent amount of damage against the boss. Hung is put down the stall, and Click perishes to another fart explosion. Hung, the absolute Chad, survives one attack from the boss, and that is enough time for me to deploy both Wind Chimes and Saga. And somehow, Wind Chimes and Saga bring it home. Let me watch as the boss bleeds out, finally letting me see the victory screen and ending my almost 4 hours of suffering on this map. This event has effectively changed my opinion on both Wind Chimes and Hung, making me into a true believer. Because wow, who would have thought having baseless opinions on an operator before using them could lead you to a wrong conclusion. This event should be renamed to Death and Chunfen, because not only did my operators perish multiple times, my sanity and account also died right with them. I originally did not plan on making this video, but I'm glad I did, because it turned out to be a very fun challenge, and a big contrast to the hell that was Invitation to Wine. If you made it to this point of the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing, so you can know when the next bout of suffering will occur. Speaking of suffering, I hope you join me next time as me and Fia take on some angels in a guide ahead rerun. Till next time.